Let's get right into it. Number 18. The wrong turn that started all wrong turns. So, get this. World War I, the Great War, a conflict that wiped out over 20 million people and redrew the map of Europe, basically happened because a guy's driver didn't have GPS. You know the story. Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets assassinated in Sarajevo. But the part they skip in history class is that the first assassination attempt that day totally failed. A guy threw a bomb at his car, it bounced off and blew up the car behind him. So, the Archduke is shaken, but fine. He decides to change his plans and visit the wounded from the bombing at the hospital, but nobody told the driver. The driver, following the original route, takes a wrong turn onto a side street. The official in the car yells, "Hey, you're going the wrong way." The driver hits the brakes, the car stalls, right in front of a sandwich shop where one of the other assassins, Gavrilo Princip, was sulking because he thought he'd failed. Princip just looks up. There's his target, 5 feet away, not moving. The rest is, well, history's most terrifying oops moment. Number 17, the Seward's Folly. That wasn't folly at all. Imagine buying a house and your neighbors all laugh at you. What a dump, they say. Then you find out the backyard is basically a solid gold oil fountain. That's the Alaska Purchase. In 1867, Russia sold the entire territory of Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million. That's about 2 cents an acre. Why so cheap? Because Russia was broke after the Crimean War and was terrified that their rivals, the British, would just take it. They figured getting some cash was better than getting nothing. Back in the US, people lost their minds. They called it Seward's Folly after the Secretary of State who made the deal. They called it Seward's Icebox. Journalists had a field day mocking this frozen wasteland. Then, 30 years later, someone found gold. And then someone found oil. And then someone realized it was one of the most strategically important spots on the globe. Yeah, folly. Number 16. The great, miscalculated American road trip. You know Christopher Columbus, the guy who sailed the ocean blue in 1492? Well, he discovered the Americas for one simple reason. He was really, really bad at math. See, Columbus didn't set out to find a new continent. He was just trying to find a shortcut to Asia. At the time, most educated people knew the Earth was round, but they disagreed on how big it was. Columbus latched onto a bunch of wildly incorrect calculations that made the Earth seem about 25% smaller than it actually is. He also thought Japan was way farther east than it is. If he'd known the real distance, he and his funders would have known the journey was impossible. His crew would have starved to death long before hitting Japan. He basically succeeded because 2 entire continents he had no idea existed got in his way. It's the single most successful failing upwards moment in human history. Number 15. The Who's in Charge? Disaster. Alexander the Great, the guy who conquered most of the known world by the time he was 30. He was a military genius, a brilliant leader, and apparently a terrible estate planner. When he died in 323 BC, he was young, and he died pretty suddenly. His generals gathered around his deathbed and asked the big question, to whom do you leave your empire? Alexander's supposed last word was kratisto, which means to the strongest. This is the ancient equivalent of yelling YOLO and throwing your car keys into a mob. His generals, the Diadochi, immediately started fighting over the scraps. This wasn't a small squabble, it was 50 years of brutal, non-stop civil war. His entire family was murdered. The empire he built was permanently shattered into rival kingdoms, and the chaos paved the way for the next big superpower, Rome, to eventually just swallow them all up. Number 14, the world's worst take-backsies. So you win a massive, devastating war, World War I, and you want to make sure the other guy, Germany, never ever does it again. What do? Well, if you're the Allied powers at the Treaty of Versailles, you do that. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a you owe us your soul, your wallet, and your firstborn child kind of deal. The treaty forced Germany to accept 100% of the blame for the war, stripped them of huge chunks of territory, crippled their military, and handed them a reparations bill so massive they literally couldn't pay it. The result? The German economy collapsed, and the entire population felt deeply, profoundly humiliated and angry. This toxic soup of resentment created the perfect breeding ground for extremist politics. A young, angry politician named Adolf Hitler built his entire career on promising to tear up that unfair treaty. And, well, we all know how that turned out. Number 13, that one time a bear almost started WWIII. This one is just special. We're at the peak of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everyone is white-knuckled, terrified that one itchy trigger finger is going to end all human life. At a US airbase in Minnesota, a guard sees a figure trying to climb the security fence. He does what he's trained to do. He shoots at it and hits the sabotage alarm. But due to a magnificent wiring error, this specific alarm at this base didn't just alert the base, it sent a signal to nearby fighter jets, ordering them to take off. The jets were armed with nuclear weapons. The pilots, believing World War III had just kicked off, started their engines and began to taxi onto the runway. An officer, realizing what was happening, frantically drove his truck onto the runway and flashed his lights, signaling them to stop just in time. The mysterious, fence-climbing saboteur that almost ended the world, it was a bear, a literal bear. Number 12, the guy who invented his own doom. If there was an Olympics for having the worst impact on the planet, Thomas Migley Jr. would have gold medals in 2 different sports. First, in the 1920s, this guy solved the problem of car engines knocking by discovering you could add tetraethyl lead to gasoline, leaded gas. Despite the fact that factory workers handling the stuff were getting sick, hallucinating, and dying, he pushed it through. He even held a press conference where he washed his hands in the stuff to prove it was safe, after which he was reportedly sick for a year. But he wasn't done. He also helped create Freon, the first CFC. You know, the stuff that tore a hole in the ozone layer the size of a continent. A historian later said Migley had more impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism in Earth history. And the kicker? After being paralyzed by polio, he invented a pulley system to get in and out of bed. He was later strangled to death by his own invention, a truly spectacular cell phone. Number 11, the Maginot not-so-great line. After World War I, France had a very reasonable thought. Man, we really do not want to fight Germany on our soil ever again. Their solution? The Maginot Line. This was a massive line of concrete fortresses, tank traps, and underground bunkers built along the border with Germany. It was a technological marvel, impenetrable. It had air conditioning. It was also a colossal waste of money. Why? Because it's like installing a $5 million shark-proof steel fence on your beach, but only building it halfway down the sand. The line didn't extend through the impassable Ardennes forest or along the border with Belgium. The Germans, in 1940, simply went around it. They blitzed right through Belgium and the Ardennes, completely bypassing the entire defensive line and trapping the Allied armies. Number 10. The surprise party in the woods. For a while there, the Roman Empire seemed unstoppable. They had the legions, the discipline, the cool red capes. Then they ran into Arminius. See, the Romans were trying to conquer Germania, the lands beyond the Rhine River. Their general, Varus, had 3 entire legions with him, and he had a local helper, a Germanic noble named Arminius, who had served in the Roman army and was totally trustworthy. Wink. Arminius was in fact playing them the whole time. He secretly united the Germanic tribes and then told Varus about a local rebellion, offering to guide the Roman army through the Teutoburg forest to crush it. Varus, trusting his body, marched all 20,000 of his men right into the single worst ambush in Roman history. The legions were completely wiped out. The defeat was so total that Rome basically gave up on conquering Germania forever. Number 9. The day D-Day was just a distraction. The D-Day landings in Normandy were the biggest amphibious invasion in history. They were also almost a lot harder, if not for a massive German blunder. The Allies ran a brilliant deception campaign called Operation Fortitude, creating a whole ghost army with inflatable tanks and fake radio chatter to convince the Germans the real invasion was coming at Calais. And the Germans totally bought it. Even after 150,000 troops hit the beaches in Normandy, Hitler and his high command were convinced it was just a diversion. They held their best tank divisions back, waiting for the real attack at Calais that never came. To make it worse, key German commanders were literally MIA. Rommel, the guy in charge of defending the coast, was in Germany for his wife's birthday party. Hitler himself was asleep and his staff refused to wake him. This confusion gave the Allies just enough time to secure their beachheads and eventually win the war in Europe. Number 8. When no thanks costs you an empire. In the 1450s, the Byzantine Empire was basically just the city of Constantinople. It was a shadow of its former glory, but it had one big thing going for it: the massive, impenetrable Theodosian walls. Then an engineer named Orban showed up. He went to the Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI and said, "Hey, I've designed a brand new super cannon. It can blast through anything. Pay me, and it's yours." The problem? The emperor was broke. He checked his pockets, found only lint, and had to turn Orban down. So Orban, an engineer with a very cool cannon to sell, did the logical next step. He went to the Byzantines' mortal enemy, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. Mehmed basically said, "I'll take 20. Orban built his basilica cannon. The Ottomans pointed it at those impenetrable walls, and in 1453, the Byzantine Empire ceased to exist. Talk about a "you'll regret this" moment. Number 7. The let's kill all the birds plan. This is a perfect example of what happens when you try to fix nature without understanding it. In 1958, China launched the Four Pests campaign. The goal? To eliminate rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Wait, sparrows? Yeah. The logic was that sparrows ate grain, so killing all the sparrows would mean more food for the people. So the entire country was mobilized. People banged pots and pans to keep the birds from landing until they dropped dead from exhaustion. Nests were destroyed, eggs were smashed, millions and millions of sparrows were killed. And it worked. The sparrows were pretty much gone. The problem? Sparrows don't just eat grain, they also eat insects. With no sparrows, the insect population, especially locusts, exploded. They swarmed the countryside, devouring crops on a scale the sparrows never could. This campaign was a massive contributor to the Great Chinese Famine, which killed tens of millions of people. The plan was, in short, a disaster. Number 6. The unluckiest meet-cute in Mongol history. Rule number 1 of the 13th century: do not mess with Genghis Khan. Rule number 2, especially do not mess with his messengers. The Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire missed that memo. It started when a local governor in the Shah's empire attacked a Mongol trade caravan. Genghis Khan, being surprisingly reasonable, sent a group of diplomats to the Shah to basically say, "Hey, not cool. Punish that guy and let's get back to business." The Shah's response? He had the envoys killed and sent the severed head of the main ambassador back to Genghis Khan. In Mongol culture, harming an envoy wasn't just an insult, it was a "please delete our entire civilization" request. Genghis Khan responded with a tidal wave of fury, invading and completely obliterating the Khwarezmian Empire. We're talking millions killed, cities turned to dust. This invasion is what pushed the Mongol armies west, where they just kept going. All because one guy couldn't just say, "my bad." Number 5. The Disneyland Fast Pass to Exile. For a long time, the guy expected to take over North Korea from Kim Jong-il wasn't Kim Jong-un. It was his older half-brother, Kim Jong-nam. He was the eldest, the favorite, until he really wanted to ride Space Mountain. In 2001, Kim Jong-nam was arrested at Tokyo's Narita airport. He was traveling with 2 women and a child, using a fake Dominican Republic passport under the name Pangxiong, which translates to Fat Bear. His destination, Tokyo Disneyland. This was not a good look. The incident was a massive international embarrassment for the super secretive North Korean regime. His father, Kim Jong-il, was reportedly so humiliated that he cancelled a trip to China and removed Yongnam from the line of succession. He ended up living in exile, a potential rival to his little brother, until he was assassinated with VX nerve agent in a Malaysian airport in 2017. All for Mickey Mouse. Number 4. The spy who trusted a little too much. This one sounds like a terrible spy comedy, but it actually happened. In the 8th century, the Byzantine Empire and the Bulgarian Empire were not friends. Byzantine Emperor Constantine V had a rock-solid spy network inside the Bulgarian court. The Bulgarian ruler, Telerig, knew he had a mole problem, so he came up with a plan that was either genius or just insanely lucky. He sent a letter to Constantine, pretending he wanted to defect. He claimed his life was in danger and he was ready to flee to Constantinople, but he was worried about his friends. He asked the emperor for a list of all the Byzantine agents in Bulgaria, just so he could ensure their safety during his escape, and Constantine believed him. He sent Telerig the list. Telerig then proceeded to round up and execute every single person on it, completely destroying the Byzantine spy network in one move. This is like a supervillain asking Batman for the Justice League's home addresses, and Batman mailing it to him. Number 3. The oops, did I say that out loud? Revolution. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the symbolic end of the Cold War, didn't happen because of a big speech or a major battle. It happened because a tired, mid-level East German official named Günther Schabowski messed up at a press conference. On November 9th, 1989, the East German government had decided to slightly ease travel restrictions, but the new rules weren't supposed to be announced yet, and they were complicated. Schabowski was handed a note about it right before the press conference, but he didn't really read it. Near the end, a reporter asked when the new rules would take effect. Schabowski, shuffling through his papers, just shrugged and said, "As far as I know, effective immediately, without delay." The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, thousands of East Berliners, hearing they were immediately free to go, rushed to the Berlin Wall. The border guards had no idea what was going on. They had no orders. Faced with a massive cheering crowd, they just opened the gates, and the wall and the Cold War came tumbling down. Number 2. The invasion that forgot about winter. This is maybe the most famous military blunder of all time. In 1941, Adolf Hitler decided to invade the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. He was feeling pretty good. He'd just conquered France. Britain was on the ropes. How hard could Russia be? He planned it as a blitzkrieg, a lightning-fast war that would be over in a few months, before winter. This was mistake number 1. The invasion was massive, but the Soviet Union was more massive. The Germans underestimated everything: the terrible roads, the long supply lines, and the sheer number of soldiers the Soviets could throw at them. The quick victory stalled just outside Moscow. And then winter came, the legendary Russian winter. The German army, still in their summer uniforms, literally froze. Their machines seized up, their supplies couldn't reach them. The failure of Barbarossa was the turning point of the war in Europe, leading to staggering German losses and the eventual pushback that would end in Berlin. Number 1, the one that got away and changed the war. Alright, our number 1 spot. The mistake that handed the Allies the keys to the kingdom. We're talking about the German submarine U-110. In 1941, this U-boat was forced to the surface by British depth charges. The crew surrendered and abandoned ship. As they were being picked up, their commander, realizing his U-boat wasn't sinking, tried to swim back to scuttle it and destroy its secrets. He was never seen again. British sailors boarded the abandoned sub, and what they found was the single greatest intelligence prize of the war. It wasn't just an Enigma machine, the supposedly unbreakable German cipher device. It was the machine, plus all the codebooks, charts, and setting sheets. This was the complete package. The British let the U-boat sink to keep their discovery a secret. With these materials, code breakers at Bletchley Park, including Alan Turing, were finally able to read the German Navy's secret messages, giving them a massive advantage in the Battle of the Atlantic and shortening the war by years. So, there you have it. 18 times people had a really bad day at the office and accidentally redrew the world map. It just goes to show, history isn't just a straight line, it's a messy, chaotic, and often hilarious series of wrong turns, bad math, and angry bears. Suddenly, that reply all email you sent doesn't seem so bad, does it? So if your brain feels a little bigger from all these historical facepalms, do us a favor and smash that like button. And subscribe. You know, before you accidentally sell Alaska for pennies on the dollar. See you next time.